Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, A Zero Trust Model, Continuous Security for Remote Digital Technology Users. This is an installment of RemoteWorks, a Citrix virtual series examining the best practices, lessons learned, and realities of a remote work world. My name is Jeremy Schwartz, and I'll be your host for today's presentation. Our featured speakers for today are Akhilesh Dhawan, Director, Product Marketing at Citrix, and Florin Lazurca, Senior Technical Marketing Manager of Secuirty at Citrix. Before we get started, let me cover a couple of housekeeping details. We will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of today's session, and I invite you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the Ask a Question window in the interface. Also, this event is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand version will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email. With that, I will now hand it over to Akhilesh to start the presentation. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good to be here. So in the session today, as Jeremy mentioned, we're going to talk about the Citrix story on Zero Trust and how we are helping our customers work remotely from their home locations or wherever they are and get their work done. But before we get started, I want to take a kind of a little bit of a step back on what's the Zero Trust story that Citrix has. I think a lot of us have heard stories around Zero Trust with different vendors pitching their stories, and since it's a framework, it's kind of a per vendor story, and I wanted to kind of highlight what is Citrix take on Zero Trust and how are we different than other point solutions that are out there in the market providing Zero Trust. So if you look at the key concepts of Zero Trust, it talks about having a more collective approach towards security rather than implementing point products that only offer access to a certain type of application, or point products that only do device management and give access using only the managed devices and so on and so forth. So with Citrix, we have a broader portfolio that we're integrating and providing a holistic outcome to our end customers. Not only consolidating these point products, but creating a platform approach, creating a centralized approach wherein customers can, define their security policies, enforce their security policies, and have one single dashboard where they can not only monitor users interacting with the applications or their system, but have a consistent risk profile of that user across all these different segments in their data centers or within wherever their applications are deployed. So as you all know, right, one question that we keep getting asked is, hey, Citrix is a VDI player, and what are we doing in this market? So obviously we have in the history of us is providing virtualized applications, providing virtualized desktops to end users no matter where they are, and providing a lot of contextual policies of how we authenticate users going to VDI sessions or virtualized sessions through a gateway that we have. Now, this has been our bread and butter, but a lot of our customers are moving away from virtualized apps. A lot of our customers are moving away from an environment where they are deploying more of web applications and SaaS applications. And that's where Citrix is moving as well. And providing some of those same or similar security controls that we provided for our virtualized app and bringing them to a more modern work environment wherein customers have deployed web applications or they're consuming SaaS applications and they don't want a virtualized application or virtualized SaaS or virtualized web application. So consuming web and SaaS applications is where our customers are, and that's where Citrix is heading as well in this space, providing not only contextual policies at the time of login, but during the session, how do we provide policies where you can continue to monitor user behavior, not only across virtualized apps, but also across modern day apps like web and SaaS. So when we see our customers deploying zero trust, deploying a more cloud-based security solution, we see a lot of these we still see a lot of these different silos. Silos where customers have deployed an access management solution from vendor A, they have deployed an MDM or a managed device solution from a vendor B, and these are they may or may not be offering zero trust, but they're all only doing in their own siloed way. So, for example, a risk profile of a user in an access management solution might be a very different risk profile of that same user when you go into another solution by a different vendor. So this defeats the very purpose of having the zero trust in the first place, and that's where I think Citrix is coming in and solving those needs. Apart from not getting a holistic zero trust outcome, these point products also result in providing policies that are not consistent across these different vendor solutions that a customer may have deployed, and that they doesn't seem to be very adequate policies, because one policy may not be one system may not be talking to another system and passing on the credentials to that particular vendor solution. And obviously, there is a lot of cost associated with managing multiple vendors. You have support costs, you have training costs, you have all the operational costs that comes with having multiple vendors providing very specific solutions. But then it also, provides a very poor user experience, because every time a user has to access a certain application, they have to log into a traditional SSL VPN solution, or maybe a single sign-on solution which is different than an SSL VPN, or going through other proxies that they may have deployed in their data centers. So obviously this does not provide a very consistent and results in a very degraded user experience. So Citrix mantra is to keep it simple, right? Keep it simple in the way that it is more secure. Keep it simple in a way that provides a much better user experience, because it is one system that they have to log into and get access to all applications. So that's where we are moving towards, is providing that simplicity that in a system that triangulates on having a consistent set of trusts or a risk profile of the user, which is across the system, policies that can identify and that can authenticate a user across the system, and then be able to continuously authenticate and monitor the users in order to reduce the risk. So we talking about our UABA and analytics platforms, which can monitor the user across all these different applications, coming in from different systems and different devices, and providing a more holistic story, not only for a device that is managed, but also for the unmanaged devices. And we'll talk about some of these security controls that we have, wherein we can provide access to a user if they're coming from a BY or a personal device. That results in a much better user experience, especially in the scenarios where there is a lot of remote, workers that are working from remote locations, using their own personal devices, coming from networks that may have high latency, and so on and so forth. So that is where I think we are kind of focusing on our zero trust, is to combine these three different kind of pillars to our story around how do we increase this trust in the system by reducing the risk as well as improving the end user experience. So the way we are kind of layering the security stack within the Citrix Workspace umbrella is obviously, first of all, providing that user experience wherein you can single sign-on across all applications, whether they are virtual applications, whether they are third-party web that are deployed in the data center, or they are SaaS applications, or even the traditional two-tier applications that you may have deployed. Bringing them all applications together in one single portal, wherein user just have to log in once to access applications that they're authorized to. So that's the user experience part. And then we are layering on top of that is the security controls that our Citrix Access Control service provides. And we're going to talk about some of these contextual capabilities and the data governance controls that we have for all these different type of applications, whether it be something like a watermarking a web page or controlling a copy paste or clipboard access, and so on and so forth. And then obviously tying them together with our analytics, wherein we continuously provide assurance in the system, which is continuously monitoring as well as enforcing the controls automatically or notifying admins as the need may be. And then bringing them together with, providing access to the users who are obviously using the managed devices with Citrix, but also if they don't want to enroll their device. A lot of times we've seen users bringing their own devices, especially when they're working from home or on remote locations when they're not in office. They want to be able to get to an application fast, and a lot of the new gen of users that we have seen, they do want to use all the different type of devices that they currently own. The answer that we get from IT is, enroll your device. And a lot of times we hear users having any privacy concerns of enrolling their devices, or IT saying, denying access to applications that because they don't have enough security controls to protect access from these devices. So how Citrix is solving, we have some security controls that we're going to talk about on how do we provide those security controls for users coming in from personal or BYO devices to access their applications. So the top three conversations that we're going to have with you today is, VPN-less access. This is, I think, one of the key use cases that we have seen, especially in times today where, majority of the workforce is working remotely, and we have seen a lot of customers struggling with their existing VPNs and trying to make them more, scale them up to meet the demands of remote workforce, or a lot of customers talking about challenges that they're facing with their existing VPN solutions. The second conversation we want to also talk about is providing a holistic access management capabilities around SaaS applications. And this is one single solution that can provide not only a VPN-less access to your internet, web, and virtual apps, but also to your SaaS applications, or also to your applications that may be deployed in the cloud. And then in the third conversation, we're going to focus on protecting access to these applications, not only through the managed devices, but also how do we provide them access to these applications using unmanaged devices or devices that are BYO. And this is the kind of a main kind of pillar of our conversation around Citrix Access Control service, wherein not only does it bring in all the applications within one single portal, be it your SaaS, web, virtual apps, but even if you are using, let's say, share file or file sync capabilities from Citrix, we can actually also bring in your files within the system. And providing layering security on top of that, wherein we provide you some granular access control capabilities, providing some watermarking and data governance capabilities for the data that is in your SaaS applications or on-prem applications, and so on and so forth. And then obviously with Citrix Analytics, providing the visibility and risk scoring for users accessing these applications. So let's get on to our first conversation, which is the, how do I start, looking at replacing my traditional VPN technology with Citrix Workspace or Citrix Access Control. So before we obviously talk about what it provides, I think just want to kind of revisit some of these challenges that we have seen from our customers when they're looking at when they have a VPN solution. So these are the four challenges that we see. VPNs, as we all know, they were designed to meet workforce requirements, maybe 10, 20, 30% of workforce working remotely at any given point in time. But obviously, there are events that necessitates that majority of the remote work workforce is working remotely, and customers are kind of struggling to make their existing VPNs meet the demands of workforce that is 85%, 80%, whatever, working from a remote location. Because adding a bandwidth or appliances for VPNs is obviously cumbersome. It takes time to add the capacity. You have to procure appliances, you have to reconfigure those, and then deploy appliances, and that takes time. But in that time, how do I answer the requirements that my users are asking for? And then a much bigger problem with security, right? I mean, so with VPNs, the way they obviously work is they extend your network to a remote location. That means is if your users are using devices, they get the intranet address and they get physically connected to your network, your corporate network. And that exposes your networks to a lot of security risks, especially coming in from devices that are not managed. And that can completely take the entire network down of your organization. So there are a lot of security risks associated with having an approach where just to access applications, you're extending the whole entire network out to your remote locations. And then because these VPNs are not scalable, they don't also have any optimization technologies for applications that they deliver to remote locations. So if your users are coming from home locations or in locations that do not have a strong Wi-Fi, we see a lot of degraded performance of delivering these applications, and then there is a lot of frustration, especially when the users are working remote. There is a lot of pressure they're dealing with already. Combine that with the user experience that they get from a VPN, it just frustrates them, and they're not being productive. And then at the end, I think one of the things that we kind of overlook is the implied privacy, right? So if you are connected to a VPN, all your data is traversing through your data center. So there are times when your machines are still connected to VPNs. A lot of times users are doing their personal work. They are going to order groceries for their house because everything is closed. So they're going to Amazon's or Costco's of the world. They are shopping for their items, or they're doing some other personal work. But IT can monitor all these data traffic, right? So there's a lot of concern on employees is, I'm connected to my VPN. Why should I, or why should the IT be looking at the data that I'm spending in my personal time? So that is another concern that we see a lot of our customers. And that is what we want to answer with the cloud-based service that we have at Citrix Access Control. So things that we obviously talk about with Workspace is the notion of identity, right? So obviously, we have a very strong ecosystem of integration. So if you are using any of these identity platforms in your organization, there is we integrate with them out of the box. We do understand that you have made your investments already with these identity platforms like Okta or Microsoft Azure or Active Directory that you may have. There are works that we are doing to increase this ecosystem. We don't intend to rip and replace any of these, and we seamlessly integrate with these technologies and platforms, also providing authentication capabilities from all these different vendors. So if you're using any of the third-party MFA or third-party identity providers, we can obviously integrate with that and provide you the security layer on top of these identity repositories. So the way we do the VPN-less access is we have the Citrix Access Control service that is control plane is in the cloud, wherein we deploy something like a gateway connector in your data center that has only an outbound connection into the access control service. And this service allows you to do VPN-less access, that means it doesn't connect to your network, but it just provides you access at the application layer itself. So your network doesn't get exposed, and your users are getting the best performance because the access control service is available across all different geos that you have, and users are directed to the nearest possible path, and they get the best performance. It's very scalable because you just need to add the users that get access to the service. You can add users via groups, their roles, etc. in the system, and boom, they get remote access to their apps. There is no configuring an appliance, there is no additional configuration, buying a new appliance, or there are no firewall ports to be open, and so on and so forth. So it's a very seamless way to give access to your on-prem applications or on-prem web applications, if you will. So as I said, right, so it solves all the different challenges that you come with a traditional VPN. And as I said earlier, right, so it's giving you access at the application layer, and the user is directed to the nearest path possible, providing the best performance and scalability across all different geos. And then at the end, there's no privacy concerns as well, because not all the traffic needs to go through Citrix. So any traffic that starts from the workspace, which is your corporate applications, your business work, business-related work, will only go through our service. Anything that you want to do outside of Citrix workspace, we don't intercept that traffic at all. So you can actually do your private, your personal work outside of Citrix workspace. When you want to do your office work, you can come in Citrix workspace, and that is where we provide you that segmentation of your work profiles, if you will. So in addition to the web applications, we also have a complete single sign-on to SaaS applications within the same UI. Right? So not only do we give you access to your on-prem web or your on-prem virtual applications, but also to SaaS applications like Salesforce and Workdays and Office 365 and so on and so forth. That helps you consolidate. A lot of times we have seen customers who have different single sign-on solutions and a different SSL VPN solution. And with Citrix Access Control service, you can now consolidate both these use cases with one single solution. And that's where I think we provide that value with a much better user experience, a much better cost effectiveness, and it's much easier to now define your policies and enforce your policies in one single place, and you get the consistency across all these different applications. For customers, if you are, so these applications obviously are accessed through Workspace, but if you are, our virtualized apps and desktops customers who want to also stay on-prem, you want to keep the storefront on-prem, you want to have the same UI for all applications, we can also provide you SaaS and web applications in your storefront UI itself. So with Access Control Service, you can actually start importing web and SaaS applications within the storefront UI without having to virtualize any SaaS or a web application. So these are natively accessed within the storefront UI itself, and that is also something that we support. So you don't have to manage two different portals. Obviously, if you are looking at a workspace, which is our service in the cloud, you can have that UI, which is much more richer than the storefront UI. But if you have any compliance requirements, or if you have any security requirements that you want to stay on-prem with storefront, you can do that. And we give you that option to keep your storefront UI the same and also get access to your web and SaaS applications. So with that, I'll pass it on to Florin for the next few slides, talking about the admin experience and some of the demos that he has for us. Florin?
Thank you, Akhilesh. So I'll spend a few minutes just looking at the comprehensive view of what a user connection could look like, and then we'll go through a demo of an admin experience and also the user experience as well. So as Akhilesh mentioned, you can bring your own identity, whether it's Microsoft Azure, Okta, Ping, Google. We have here it's continuous assurance that happens from the end user connecting through a device, connecting through the network, connecting to the resource, and to whether that's on-prem, in a SaaS, in public cloud, where we do a check of the user security stance as well as what they're doing. So we'll cover that a little bit later. And then the application delivery fabric is the network that's being delivered, whether that's a SD-WAN type network for multiple branches, or whether it's for a remote user, an office user. So we have, for example, this remote user working from home, connecting from a home personal device from their home, and we'll do one-factor, two-factor, multiple-factor authentication, and they'll get access to a console where they see their resources. So it could be that they're using VPN-less access. They can get SSO to all apps, that's virtual apps, web apps, SaaS apps, like Akhilesh mentioned. You get those virtual apps and desktops that they may need, or those applications, the web applications that they need as well. Now, at the same time, we're doing protections on those endpoints to make sure that when they're copying and pasting things, there's no malware that is being able to scrape that information, scrape that screen, log those key presses and so forth. Data protection for their file sharing, and looking at edge security for the WAN devices for threat management as well. Endpoint management for those devices as well. We can check and see if they're follow the guidelines of the proper OS. Are they jailbroken? Are they updated to the proper level? Are they patched? And for certain situations, we may offer the end user a browser that's not even running in your data center. It's not running on their device. It could be running in our data center. So we can do browser isolation. And I'll kind of go through a couple of those different options. And with that as well, we couple that with web filtering, where we can block out certain sites. So I'll go ahead and go through what an admin experience starts looking like. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen and flip over to what that looks like. We're going to just cover the slides real quick and give you an idea of what the templates look like for the SaaS applications, right? So we have a number of pre-built templates with the correct fields that need to be filled out, and some already have in place the right settings, whether it's Humanity, whether it's G Suite, Expensify, Slack, for example. So it makes the onboarding of applications very quick. It's just a couple of fields that need to be filled out. What's the assertions, the SAML assertions, and so forth for that to happen. Looking forward here to the next session. Now, once these applications, these SaaS apps are being run through access control, we can apply specific security functionality to them. Do we want to be able to restrict clipboard access? Do we want to be able to restrict printing and some navigation, the back and forth bars or buttons? Do we want to restrict downloads? And do we want to be able to display a watermark? So all those are independently can be turned on or off. Now, when we look at the analytics portion, so that's previously I talked about a lot of the enforcement. Now I want to be able to see what block sites, for example, that the users have been hitting, and then if it happens a lot, it increases their risk score and potentially puts them on a watch list. So looking at that, let's go ahead and look at this other slide here on the SSO portion of it. So we have a device, has Workspace app on it, and I'll show you how Workspace app looks like. It connects to an identity broker, and it provides single sign-on to SaaS apps, the mobile apps, web apps, and virtual apps, right? So visually speaking, we're going to cover from the device to Workspace app. We're going to do a single sign-on service to a SaaS app. We're going to use Salesforce in this case, and that can also be done for virtual apps and desktops as well. So switching over now to broadcasting my screen, let's go ahead and take a look at Citrix Cloud, right? So this is the management platform where we have multiple tiles for access control, analytics, endpoint management. There's the gateway and micro apps and so forth. So this is the admin view of what needs to be done to enable access control and to view what is being pulled in from the analytics engine, right? So switching over real quick to authentication here with access control. This is where we set up authentication. We can do multi-factor authentication. We'll have specific apps we can enable and disable and enable the configure content access. So this is where we do the categories of what we want to block. This is for the URL filtering portion of access control. And we'll cover that, what that looks like within this from the user experience as well. So here's an example of specific apps that are already there. We have a number of ones that are pre-built. There's one for Salesforce. And we can go in and edit it and see the actual functionality that's there. The app details, these are the specific fields that need to be filled up, and enhanced security. This is where we enable and display restrictions, enable and display watermarks, and also the single sign-on functionality as well. So all this is done within a very easy workflow. And then once the user has made some traffic through, we can start seeing whether we have any usage. So let's go ahead and populate some of that. Let's go ahead and go to the end user experience. And so we have a workspace app here, and I'm already logged in. I've done my authentication. I have my applications available. I have a number of them that are available for me as given to me by IT. Some of them are virtualized apps. Some of them are SaaS apps, and some are internal web apps. And then we also have some that are set up as a secure browser. So that launches up a browser session independently in Azure. We have our desktops. So I have a number of different desktops. Perhaps I have a AWS running desktop or an Azure one. I have a Linux-based desktop. Maybe I want to do some coding. And then I have a 3D desktop with additional 3D hardware that I might need for rendering and so forth. So files, a number of shared files and folders. So this is the experience of having your data, your applications, your desktops, virtual applications, SaaS apps, web apps, all in one place under lock and key. And let's go ahead and go to my favorites, and we'll do Salesforce. For example, I want to now use my domain credentials that I've already logged in with and get single sign-on to Salesforce. And what happens now, and I'll explain what's going on, but I'm actually running an embedded browser that is running within Workspace app. This is a Chromium-based browser. As you can see, we've designated Salesforce as an app that requires additional security. It's got customer information. It's got a number of sensitive, confidential information in there. So one thing that we've done, we've put in a watermark here. So if somebody was to take their phone and take a screenshot of the screen, or a picture of the screen, I would see the user that it came from, the IP address that it came from, and so forth. If I wanted to go ahead and do some things like copy and paste, well, we've disabled copy and paste. So if I was to try to take sensitive information from the session and put it into a notepad, that would be disabled as well. So this is all running within the Chromium browser. Now, going at within this application, I have a number of links that are available, and that's normal within most of the application. What we've done is we've enabled access control to block certain content, and I'll show you what that looks like in the console as well. So we have here 3 examples: a white list, a gray list, and a black list, basically. So the blacklist would be something like the Pirates Bay, right? Pirate Bay. I do not want the employees accessing content like this, so it's restricted. It's it fits one of the categories on the access control. Now, however, I do want them to be able to access some social media sites because it may be part of their normal marketing, their regular program. It might be part of their job to do social media marketing. So what we do want to give them access, but we may not want to give them access from their device or from within the data center. So we have the option of running this session in Citrix Cloud. This is actually running on a virtualized web browser in the cloud. So everything that happens here stays within the session, and it's basically a disposable browser. So if they happen to run into any website that has ransomware or some sort of malware that's installed just by browsing to the site, it doesn't get installed on their endpoint. It doesn't get installed on the company endpoint. It doesn't even, it just stays within our data center, and it is destroyed once the images, the browser is shut off. I'm going to shut that off. Now, the other option was, the whitelist. So we want to give access to whitelist, and so they can connect directly to Google here. What's interesting here is this is a native experience. This is running on their endpoint. This has to be encapsulated by our security features. So I mentioned going to the configuring the access control. So this is on the admin side where we have the block sites. And these are the number of BitTorrent sites as well, allowed sites that are put in here, and then a number of them that are redirected. We go ahead and close this one off, and let's do a refresh of the data that's in here. So we know that we have within the last day, problematic user, events 4, that's me, and I've been going to a number of sites. So some redirecting. This is your Instagram, Facebook site that's been redirected to our secure browser. Some have been allowed, some have been blocked. So we can go in, and that's from the reporting standpoint, and see what that traffic has been going through. Now, I mentioned also the endpoint management. So this is the number of different endpoints that are connecting. Again, it's one of those tiles within the console here, Citrix Cloud. So you can see we have a number of devices that are connected. I'm connecting from a Mac OS. Some of them are active, some of them are not. Some of them have been decommissioned, and so forth. So this is where we do the device compliance checks. The endpoint management, it could be a mobile device, it could be a laptop endpoint as well. So we did access control, how to configure access control, some of the analytics portion of it, the endpoint management. There's a few more options in here around security and secure browser as well. From the endpoint and from the end user, it's quite simple. They connect with their domain credentials. They may do 1-factor, 2-factor. They launch, whether it's a virtual app, a desktop, or a SaaS or web app, and they get single sign-on to those applications. Now, perfect example is I'm a home user. I'm at home right now. I'm not going through a VPN. I'm not hitting internal web proxy that controls what I access through a full SSL VPN. But from my endpoint, I'm able to just still do work and still, from this endpoint, not browse to sites that are off limits or on the active list, on the blacklist. So we're extending that functionality to corporate and personally owned devices. I'm going to go and shoot it back to Akhilesh for the next session. Back to you.
So thanks, Florin. Thanks for the demo. That was great. So let's talk about some of the other things. When we, talk about providing access to unmanaged devices to access applications. I think if you looked at Florin's demo carefully, we talked about having a isolated browser providing access to applications that can, protect your applications from any kind of devices that may be affected with a malware and so on and so forth. So this is the remote browsing technology that Citrix has, which is part of the Citrix Access Control service, wherein you can access any applications, whether they are corporate applications or whether they are internet and just World Wide Web. You can access it through any device where we keep the traffic isolated in the Citrix Cloud environment, and there is no HTML content or data that reaches your corporate network. So in case there is any malicious activity, it is self-contained in the environment that Citrix manages for you. Obviously, we can provide you all the granular security controls with what we showed with access control. If your users are using your personal or unmanaged devices, they can actually log into Workspace portal using any browser, and then when they try to access corporate applications, and based on the policies that you have, you can redirect those sessions in a secure browser. So that gives you a control that you can provide, your users accessing your applications using any unmanaged or personal devices. So I think that's one part of it. Then we also have some policies that we didn't cover in a lot of details in the session earlier, but we do have something what we call an app protection policies, where we can see if there is any device that is affected with a malware or like a screen capturing malware or a keylogger. We can protect information being hijacked by these keyloggers or screen capturing devices. That's where I think some of the controls around for unmanaged devices come into the play. Now, these controls are available if you are currently using virtual apps and desktops. We are still working on having the same set of policies if you're using SaaS or web applications through Citrix Workspace. So that is something that will be coming soon, and we'll be announcing a tech preview of it very soon. So keep an eye on that. So that allows these set of controls, right, with app protection policies and the browser isolation, provides you a complete set of controls to give your users access to the applications if they are not using corporate devices or corporate managed devices. And that's where I think Citrix becomes very differentiated across all the other vendors, that forces you to enroll all the devices. So this is a kind of a picture that we wanted to kind of end this conversation with, providing a VPN lab. So if you're using any traditional VPNs to give access to your remote users accessing any applications in the data center, or if you have a single sign-on solution that gives you access to just your SaaS applications, you can actually now start consolidating with Citrix Access Control. And that is, I think, where you get a much scalable, much secure solution that gives you the best performance to access all the applications, whether they're deployed in the data center or they're deployed in a cloud platform like Amazon or AWS or Azure, or they're accessing any SaaS applications, providing set of contextual access policies across all, based not only on the device, but also on the location of the user and the networks they're coming in from, and so on and so forth. Providing data governance policies with not only the multi-factor authentication, but going further, providing controls like what Florin showed, right? Watermarking or copy paste control for all applications, not only for virtual applications, but across for your web and your SaaS applications, and holistically provide a zero trust access with continuously monitoring a user session, continuously understanding the behavior of the users and how they're interacting with the system, and upon detecting any anomaly, enforcing some of the security controls that are defined in the system. So I think that's where Citrix is moving and providing you value, or providing our customers with the value of a holistic security with zero trust, and looking at a more cloud-based services. So with that, I think that's all we had, and we'll open for questions.
Thank you, Akhilesh and Florin. Now, as we move into Q&A, I would like to remind the audience that if you have a question, please submit it in the Ask Question area on your screen. Simply submit your question in the text box and then hit Submit. Even if we don't answer your question during the session, we'll follow up by email with all the answers. So the first question, and I'll leave it to you guys who wants to jump on it for this one. The first question is, I have my users accessing corporate resources from different locations. Is this service available outside of the United States?
Yeah, I can take that, Jeremy. Yes, so we are available across all geos, and we are continuously updating all the POPs that our customers are asking for. So yes, to your question, we are available across all geographies. If you have users that are, or remote users that are distributed, we can provide service to all your local users, all your distributed workforce. In addition to that, we also provide access to those users based on their location. So if the users are based in, let's say, Europe, they'll be redirected to a POP nearest to their location in Europe. If they are in the US, they'll access their service through POPs made available in the United States. So depending on the location in Asia or in Australia and anywhere else that your users are, we can actually direct the traffic to the nearest possible POP, providing them the best performance for accessing the service.
That's terrific. That's a great answer. Another one here for you guys. Do I have to virtualize any web or SaaS apps, or is it natively consumed?
You don't have to. You don't have to virtualize any web and SaaS, and I think that's where kind of we are also focusing our attention to what we call the modern day applications, which are accessed through a browser. We obviously don't want to change how your users consume your web and SaaS applications, and let them use, give them the flexibility to use their own browsers to access these applications. These applications don't need to be virtualized. They can be accessed natively through Citrix Access Control.
Excellent. That's very convenient. All right, we have time for one more. Is Gateway Connector a virtual appliance? If so, do we have a list of the hypervisor it is supported on?
Yeah, so the Gateway Connector, I'll just repeat a little bit on that. So Gateway Connector is required if you are looking to access your on-prem web applications and authenticate the user against the on-prem Active Directory. So that's the role of the Gateway Connector. It only has an outbound connection, and that also means that there are no firewall ports that need to be open for any inbound connection to the Gateway Connector. These connectors are virtual appliances, very small footprint of virtual appliances that can be deployed across multiple hypervisors. If you have ESXi, or if you have Xen or Hyper-V, you can actually deploy this Gateway Connector in any of these appliances or any of these hypervisors.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for attending, and thank you, Florin and Akhilesh. That brings us to the end of our presentation. It's a great presentation, very informative. I think our audience got a lot out of it. And as a quick reminder, you can check out and register for upcoming webinars by going to citrix.com/events and by going to see all the other great webinars that we have coming up. We hope you have a great day and look forward to seeing you again soon.